Coach, after watching the last two games back, just what adjustments do you feel like y'all have to make to get back in the win column?
Yeah, I think it's just such a thin line. Two possession game here against Alabama, and for a large majority of the game in Lexington, I thought it was a two possession game. We didn't do the things that have led to success up until that point. I don't think with the caliber of competition, the caliber of coaching, I don't think that it's just one thing. I think it's a little bit of this. We failed in this particular category. I think it's a variety of things. It's kind of like winning. What one reason did we win? I never think that it's just one. I think it's a multitude of things. And so our guys have been very receptive. And in truth, Don, I think that they are aware of it. I don't think that it's necessarily we're telling them something that they haven't heard or we're watching clips of something that they don't know. But it's all of the things that impact winning, and the ball is not exclusive to winning and losing. There's a lot of things that happen other than just the ball going in the rim.
I know this might be a difficult answer to kind of untangle, but when
I like those.
Okay, when you have guys like Manny and Zurich and Wade who can get to the basket on dribble penetration, how much of them taking the game kind of ISO is their call on the floor, and how much of it is y'all's call on the bench, and what's kind of the relationship between them getting to kind of coach on the floor and y'all on the bench?
Yeah. So we break that into three different categories. Some of the structure within how we play is timing based, not result based. What are we trying to accomplish in the first six? We call that transition. What are we trying to accomplish in the next six? We call that gray, because it's not really black and white, to your point. Like, are you doing this, or do you want me to call a play? And so in OTAs in the summer, we give 2 OTAs to each category. This is what we're trying to accomplish in transition. We call that phase 1 as well. This is what we're trying to accomplish in gray. We call that phase 2. And then if we haven't shot a shot, so to say, after gray, here's our base thought process. As you know, a lot of that is horn specific. And the horn specific, Travis, without like telling all of our secrets, it is based on what the ball does. It's not based on what Buzz says. Now, there's some layers to that. And if you're new, it takes some time to kind of figure that out. And then we adjust what the ball does and the actions behind it. But if I want to call a play, is the play a full court play or is the play a half court play? That comes into it. So I think that's where 4 is special. But in defense of Zoo specifically, 4 has also been doing this for 4 years. And so his feel on predictable versus unpredictable is elite. A lot of the shots that Zoo shot in Norman were the same level of shots that he shot this past week. And his free throw attempt rate is as good as any player we've had since we've lived here. Boots was in that range. Zoo is better than Boots. So by decision, was it a target? In other words, did we call it? It was targeted. Or was it by default? Default meaning, yeah, everybody in the program knows this is what we're doing, and something came from that.
Buzz, with how well Pharrel has played, how efficient he's been, making almost every shot, is it the perfect?
Yeah, how many has he missed since Wake? 1 or 2? Shooting 91.4% since Wake. I think he's missed 2 shots.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
And he got one of those offensive rebounds that he missed. Mm-hmm. But in College Station, we don't count it if you miss it and get your own.
Yeah. So is it the perfect balance he'll found, or is there even more you can give him from usage and even maybe potentially starting him?
Yeah. We don't really care about the starting. I know Twitter does. But similar to what we talked about last week, Carter, I still think he's just scratching the surface. I think it was Olin that was asking about him last week. I think the way he's embraced what we're doing is probably what's allowed him to continue to go. And I don't think he's even close to his ceiling. I think he's a tremendous prospect. He's 19 years old. We start later on Sundays because he's going to go to church every Sunday. Great parents. He's the only person in his entire family on mother's side, father's side that won't initially start their career in the medical field. Like, this is your atypical family. And basketball is not the priority in their family in any stretch. So I think all that he's encountered in the 6 months he's lived here has been like overwhelming, shocking. Wow, this is loud. But he's having a lot of fun. And his usage rate has dramatically increased, as you know. That's why you're asking the question. And our players know he's helping us. We're serving a lot of cupcakes because he's doing such a good job making free throws. That changes the efficiency of our offense, and it also changes his usage rate. If we throw it to you and you get fouled and you go 0 for 2, well, you ended the possession with an empty, you know? So I'm excited about where he can be. We've 3 new wrinkles we added for Alabama. On a quick turnaround, we only added 1 more for Kentucky. And some of that kind of bleeds into what I was saying with Travis, how within transition, he's probably not touching it. But Zoo has been really good in transition, playing off of his drag screens. Now it's into Gray. Can our first look be to punch it inside? Does he need a screen to get to that? And then once we get into phase 3, we've done some things to throw it to him a little bit more. And then some of the targets we call are plays specifically for him.
Well, as Wade progresses, I'm very curious in your approach to that. Obviously, I'm sure you want to see him out there just as much as everybody else does.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before, and I'm not making AC mad. I talk to AC all the time. I'm not making Antoine Wright mad. I talk to him all the time. Bernard, Joe Jones, who's coaching down the street. Like, this league, what's transpired during Forrest's career, the prowess that he's played with in so many categories as a sub 6'2" guard. Yeah, I want him to play every minute.
but so along those lines, I just wonder, your approach or your thinking when it comes to when that time comes to you. Do you feel like there's this tough decision that will come up? Do I want to make sure you don't put him in and too early and playing the long game? I guess what I'm getting at, would you, if he was available, would you be ready to put him in, or is it smarter to say, okay, we need this guy completely healthy in February?
Yeah, I've never been asked this question in an interview, and I'll never get a job as an administrator, but it's one thing that I would always ask if I was an administrator, is I would try to vet how a coach handles that. And you're hearing a lot of coaches say a lot of different things, and you're seeing a lot of new things that come with the industry. I think it's how my parents raised me, just to be very honest. That's a question that I would ask, and I wouldn't ask it as straight up as you did as an interviewer. Because I do think somewhere in this, Olin, if you don't win enough, you lose your job. And if you don't have enough talent, you're not going to win enough to keep your job. And whoever is in charge of the rules and whatever the rules are, adjust and understand the expectations of winning and the talent required. That's never going to change. But for me, I have handled injuries the same regardless of the player's name in my 18 years, regardless of the player's talent, regardless of the player's age. I don't mean this holier than thou. Specific to me as a head coach, the young men that I've coached, their mother, their father, or if they had both, their aunt, their grandmother, whoever it was that they were living with, they trusted me to do right by their son. I don't always use the same language that they would prefer, but I have given my commitment, my heart commitment. I'm going to treat him exactly the way I would my son. And my wife is not always pleased with how I handle my sons, but I'm going to do right by your son's life. And so, like, questionable, doubtful, limited. No. We don't do that where I'm from. That's my son. And if he's got a concussion, we're going to make sure his brain's right. And if his toes got turf toe, we're going to make sure his toe's right. So, like, as you guys know, and I know you took it as if I was being offstandish, it's the only time last year that I've ever said anything about injuries. And it was because I knew some of all this stuff was coming, and I didn't want to use that as justification. But when 4 is healthy, 4 will play. But I'm going to do right by his life, by his body, by my relationship with his parents, whether it impacts our team, and it does impact our team because he's a potential All-American, I think.
It seems like Andy's rebounding numbers have kind of
Really bad.
Yeah, just as you've been able to assess the film and, whether other guys are contributing to the rebounding like Zurich or Pharrel or
Yep.
those guys, but just what have you been able to put a finger on why Andy's rebounding numbers have just kind of ticked off these last few games?
Yeah, that was similar to what I was with Donna. It's not one thing. And it is not exclusively Andy, and not all of it is negative. Gochi is a presence in the rim, at the rim. I think Henry's numerically done better than ever in this category. But in the games this past week, what has brought us to this point, I would say, has been the number one category of things that I would attribute losing to. Alabama got back over half of their misses, and Kentucky, who goes about it in a completely different way, got back 40% of their misses. And we did a really good job on the offensive glass versus Alabama, and did a really poor job on the offensive glass at Kentucky. And so if red is bad and yellow is okay and green is good, we've kind of built our roster and, to some degree, how we play. Offensive rebounding has to be green per player, per team for us. And on occasion, we'll be yellow defensive rebounding because of how we play half-court defense. But we're too much red defensive rebounding and too much yellow offensive rebounding. And we shot more balls and we shot more free throws against Alabama. And we were right in that range against Kentucky too. But Andy has to do better. Buzz has to do better. Henry has to do better. Everybody. Because it's too thin of a margin, and that is so much a part of the math of how we play.
How important? Okay, how important is it to claim the home portion of these of your opponents with LSU? Maybe, I don't know if this matters after losing it last year. A lot of these guys played in that game.
Solo's probably already told the guys. Solo's in the training room now, so that would mark the earliest he's ever been to film. So I'm not saying it's because we're playing a team from his home state, but it could be. We were awful last year, just to touch that a little bit. They got to the rim 41 times. They beat us on the offensive glass. They had more pop, more juice, more energy. We probably go about the mirror part of those 6 games versus the other 12 games, 6 on the road, 6 at home. We kind of play different games within that, not because our guys need a game to play the game, but I think what's different about this year than the previous 5 years, we're going to complete all of our mirror opponents before the bye. And so they're all happening really fast. And obviously this is the last one to occur. So far, the first 2, one's been at home, one's been on the road. So 2 of the 3 of the first round are at home, which means 2 of the 3 are on the road. Yeah, you want to fight for all of them, home or on the road. But I do think that regardless who you play, home court, you want to take care of the house for sure.
Coach, obviously, 2-game skid. It's newfound territory for this team this year. What is the response or the feeling been in that locker room as they get ready for this next one?
Like as good as you could possibly imagine. Similar to what I was telling you guys last week. When you're playing quad 1A games back to back, that's very rare. When one of them's at home and one of them's on the road, that's probably a 50-50 deal. Yeah, their response to the winning, their response to the loss against Central Florida, their response against Oregon to win the next 2 in Vegas when we're in Vegas for 8 days, like there was E plus R equals O, you know that. You've read that from Brian Knight before. Event plus your response equals your outcome. Our R has been tremendous. And that's because of their character. They have great competitive maturity, but they also have great competitive character because that's who they are. And I think the relationships that they have with our staff, like we've got to continue to find ways to become even better on our off days. That includes me, because this is just happening so fast, like it is for every other team. But your treatment, your skill work, your extra time in the weight room, watching yourself as far as the clips before you have to begin to watch the opponent. But that's part of the coach's stuff too. Like Donna's, like your question. Hey man, y'all have lost 2 in a row. Let's not talk about LSU. Let's talk about you. And that's constantly a delicate line that you fight as a coach. Hey, we got to win the next one because we've lost the last 2. Okay, well, where's the line of we need to figure out why we've lost the last 2. We need to throw the ball to Gochi more. Ford needs to keep going in his rehab because he needs to get back. Zoo's handling it a lot more because there's one less ball guard out there. What kind of shots are you getting? Like, you have to diagnose where you're at. And I think you have to always bend towards how can we be a little better versus we can't give all of our energy and our emotion and our time to the opponent. But when you're playing in this league, Alabama, Kentucky, LSU, like you have to be prepared at the same time. So how you utilize your off day becomes paramount. Because you can't just shut it off for a full day and then go, all right, now what's up? We lost 2 days ago when I saw you. Are you going to holler and scream about that? Or we play LSU in 36 hours. Are we going to talk about them? Are we going to talk about both? Are we practicing today too? You know, so it's finicky.
Now that we already talked about the 2-game skid, what have you noticed about LSU? And I know they just won their first conference game. Might have a chip on their shoulder coming in here.
You see what I'm saying? Hey man, y'all have lost 2 in a row. How y'all handling it? Hey, what about LSU? So I think Coach has done a really good job in the 3 years he's been there. And in some ways, he's had 3 different teams and that's happening a lot in college athletics. But I think he's also played almost 3 different styles of play because he's such a talented coach relative to his personnel. I think there's 3 or 4 guys in SEC play that are averaging more than 20. That's hard to do. They have one of them. They have 2 really talented ball guards. They draw fouls at a high rate. They're really good in transition. They lost a very important piece to their team in December, and I think the forwards and how they've changed who's playing continue to get better with each passing week, and I'm sure you listened to Coach Calipari's press conference post game, but I tend to agree with what Coach Cal said about LSU after having watched that game. Played with great toughness, played with great energy, really high-spirited. And they had pressure on the rim offensively. They had pressure on the rim defensively. So a different roster, a different style, but how they go about it, similar to when they whipped us here last year.